Joining us now is senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake, who's traveling with the president in the Netherlands, NBC Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Dilanian, and President Emeritus for the Council on Foreign Relations and the author of the Substack newsletter Home and Away, Richard Haass. All right, Ken, this is an assessment from the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency. Give us a little bit more of what it said.
That's right, Katie. And a few caveats. It was made with low confidence, so they don't have a huge amount of confidence in the fidelity of the intelligence. It was only the DIA, not in consultation with other agencies. And it's a very initial battle damage assessment. But what it concluded, according to our sources, is that that this didn't set back the program writ large by all that much, as few as 3 to 6 months. And further, it concluded that Fordo, that underground facility that was hit with those bunker-busting bombs, was not completely destroyed. Now, you heard the president appearing to contradict that, and he said there's been more recent intelligence collected, and that's possible. It's conceivable that they have sources on the ground, they have intercepts that are adding to the picture, and the picture may change. But here's the thing, even if this attack was completely successful and destroyed all 3 of those facilities, there is some evidence and there's some belief among experts that some of the enriched uranium, fuel for nuclear weapons, was moved, and that there are some secret enrichment sites that were not bombed. And so even if this attack went perfectly, some experts do believe the Iranians will be able to go underground and will still have the capacity to build a nuclear weapon. And the U.S. may never see it, or the Israelis may never see it. And that's why people like Tony Blinken are arguing that the agreement that Donald Trump canceled with the Iranians was a preferable situation. That's a political debate. In terms of the intelligence, I think there's still a lot left to be learned, Katie.
Let me ask you, Richard, when the DIA says low confidence, help explain that to me in layman's terms.
Every time you produce intelligence assessments or judgments, it's based upon data you're receiving, human reports, technical reports, satellites, SIGINT interceptions, and you put together a picture, and it's really useful to know. We're 100% confident that X happened or is the situation, or we're only 10 or low confidence, 25%, or somewhere in between. You want to know that as a policymaker, because if you're going to make a big decision, you want to know how confident the people are in the information they're feeding you.
So there's some room here for variables and just how damaged these sites are.
Well, first of all, as Ken said, there's the battle damage assessment, the BDA of the sites we hit, those 3. And it's too early to get it. But this is you just don't know. Second of all, there's all the stuff you don't know about. So I think that's where the word obliterated is truly unfortunate.
Yeah.
I would bet every dollar on the earth that Iran still has some enriched uranium, some centrifuges, some nuclear know-how. There's things going on in some basement, in some warehouse, underground somewhere. So we shouldn't send the message that we have solved this problem. We have dealt them a blow. We have not solved this problem.
The definitives, like mission accomplished from 2003 from Iraq, that's what gets you in trouble. And Garrett, this is something that Donald Trump repeatedly does, where he's very definitive about successes or about failures. Everything is very black and white to him. We saw initially, though, that J.D. Vance was more circumspect. He said, we're going to wait and see. We're going to figure it out. We need some time to find out how much damage was done. Donald Trump very quickly rolled over that. Why is this administration so sensitive to waiting and finding out and then being honest about what they know and what they don't know?
Katie, it's been said by other political analysts smarter than me that one of Donald Trump's superpowers is his ability to declare victory at any time and move on. And I think when you look at the broader context of the statements he made today, both in that news conference and earlier in the day, it's clear that that's what he wants to do in this moment at the news conference. He indicated that he's not interested in turning this ceasefire into a negotiated peace deal. He basically says, Iran's done fighting, we're done being involved. Maybe I'll send Marco Rubio to get them to sign something, and maybe I won't. Earlier in the day, he argued that this Defense Intelligence Agency assessment almost doesn't matter, that Iran, in his view, and he doesn't make clear what he bases this on, is going to be so exhausted, so beat up from 12 days of fighting that they simply won't have the will or wherewithal to continue enriching uranium, even if they had previously wanted to. So I think when you look at this moment in the context of a president who's decided he spent 60 days trying to negotiate, he got nowhere, he had a military strike that he believes was quite successful. And if he can make that an exclamation point and move on to a new sentence, move on to talking about something else, he's perfectly happy to do so, regardless of what this preliminary information may or may not be telling us.
Garrett, the sensitivity extended to his interactions with the press today. He got very upset at reporters, including Kelly O'Donnell, for asking about this and claimed that even asking about this assessment meant that she was disparaging the American soldiers who accomplished this mission. Obviously, that is not the case. I wonder if there's an element here of defensiveness from Donald Trump and this administration because there are many in MAGA world, many allies even, who think that the decision to strike Iran was a very bad idea. And they're being pretty vocal about it.
I think that's possible, although I would argue that most of those voices in the MAGA world who were opposed to the strike have since come back around to praising Donald Trump for the manner in which it was conducted, praise that he probably does not want to interrupt by suggesting that more strikes might be required in the future. The testiness is obvious, though. It came through most directly by far in the clip you played from Pete Hegseth, and from this kind of sort of sleight of hand in which the president and his allies are implying that, or saying outright, that anytime you suggest that this attack wasn't as successful as they were saying, that you're criticizing the soldiers and airmen who conducted it as opposed to the people who planned it and authorized it. That's a blame shift that I don't think is reflected in most of the questions that I've heard or the reporting that I've seen on this topic.
We just got this out of Iran. This is from Dan DeLuce at NBC News. Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs says their nuclear facilities had been badly damaged. This is his words in an interview today with Al Jazeera. If they're saying it was badly damaged, do you trust it more or less, the damage assessment?
At the risk of being cynical, less. It's in Iran's interest for the United States and others to think that it was badly damaged, that the reconstruction, if you will, reconstitution of a nuclear program is not a real possibility. I actually think the opposite is true. I think every Iranian leader said this never would have happened had we had nuclear weapons. So I actually think Iran is now going to make a determined push, not in days, might be over years, but I think in future years this is going to be a push.
What should the American response be? Because you had a very interesting take on this situation, and you mentioned you wondered that if you went back to Bill Clinton's time and thought about the decision not to strike North Korea and destroy their nuclear program was the right one now that North Korea has a nuclear weapon.
Well, then it was a tough one. And, the danger, obviously, if we had taken out the nuclear program then, North Korea wouldn't be where it is now. But we may well have triggered a second Korean War. Wasn't an easy call. I think you could still support what the president did without claiming it obliterated anything. That it was warranted based upon the intelligence, the fact diplomacy wasn't working. The Iranians were gaming us. Everybody knew what they were doing had nothing to do with generating electricity. But don't overpromise. Don't basically say or oversell it, saying that it obliterated things. Things still exist. And we need to prepare Americans for the possibility that in 2 months or 2 years, we may have to go in and do something again. If, for example, we get new intelligence that Iran has put some centrifuges under a certain building.
How hard is it going to be to get that intelligence now?
Really hard, because the Iranians are going to make it more difficult. The Israelis, though, have the place, I think, fairly well penetrated. We're better with the satellites and the communications. But you have to assume the Iranians will go to great lengths to hide what it is they're doing. So I think we're looking at a long-term game of cat and mouse dealing with the Iranians.
There's a lot of mistrust of the Israelis out there, especially among a good portion of Americans, that what they say is not true. Benjamin Netanyahu has for years been saying that Iran is about to make a nuclear weapon. Our intelligence says they have the enriched uranium, but we're not making a nuclear weapon. That being said, explain to me how wired Iran is by Israel. When you say that, what does that mean?
They obviously have human sources there.
Yeah.
They obviously have the ability to monitor certain kinds of communications. I don't think we have the human sources. We have the satellites and other things. I think we don't have a 20/20 picture. You never know what you don't know. We obviously, and the Israelis, have a decent sense of what's going on. Look at the targeting of certain individuals who were killed. But again, that's what makes this so hard, that we have to conduct foreign policy with imperfect, incomplete information. You got to make some calls that it's not like a good bottle of red wine. If you put it aside in 6 months, you're going to have better choices. Probably not. And the downside of being wrong is Iran could be even that much farther along.
It is such an interesting moment because Iran doesn't have a lot of friends in the region. Iran has been harassing nations all around it for years now. There's obviously the Shia-Sunni divide there as well. There's a stronger relationship, at least privately, between Israel and Saudi Arabia and even the Qataris. So in terms of the way the Middle East looks today, different than it was 10, 15 years ago, what are the opportunities here now that there has been this strike? Now Donald Trump has shown that he's not just somebody who talks a big game, but he is willing to pull the trigger.
I think in the basic security questions, there's going to be wait and see. And the Saudis and others are going to say, to what extent did we take care of the Iranian problem, the Iranian nuclear problem? I think they're relieved that some of the proxies have been hurt. Yeah. But wait and see. They want to see what happens down the road. I think the big question is whether Donald Trump takes his standing in Israel and has a, shall we say, full, frank, and candid conversation with Bibi Netanyahu. He's shown his willingness to do it. He did it the other day, shall we say, in a non-PG ways. And if he basically decides that the time has come for Israel to adopt a different policy in towards Gaza or towards the West Bank, because Donald Trump wants to make the Israeli-Palestinian issue something he's associated with a great success on. That, to me, is an interesting
Yeah, that is going to
watch.
be interesting. And he's so transactional, he might have an interesting opportunity there.
Could be.
Richard Haass, thank you so much for joining us. Garrett Haake, thank you as well. Ken Dilanian, thank you.